I told y'all we have Jelani Memory joining us, and I am not a liar. So that's what's happening. Amanda of the week. Our distinguished guest. Here they come, yo. Here they come. Here they come, yo. Here they come. Welcome to the stage. Welcome to the class. Jelani, how are you?
I'm good. I didn't know I'd be ambassador of the week.
Yeah.
What an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, you are ambassador of the week. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. So I was telling everybody that you were coming on the show, and I'm gonna read just a brief bio. Jelani Memory is an African-American entrepreneur, thinker, and constant learner. He lives in Portland, Oregon with his wife and 6 kids. Has there been more than 6 now?
No, it's okay. Still 6.
You kept it at 6. All right. And because, sometimes bios haven't been updated and it's like, actually it's 9 now. All right. In 2018, he wrote a book for his 6 kids called A Kid's Book About Racism. And it has blossomed into a full line, y'all, a full line of books that really help children navigate the nuances of this world we are in. You can see some of them behind Jelani. And I bought several the other day because I basically treat them like when people come to the house who have kids, they leave with a book.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, okay, your kid need this book. I feel like your baby need this particular book. All right. And so here are some of the titles just so you all, because I know you all have seen these books. A Kid's Book About Racism, Anxiety, Belonging, Feminism, Disabilities. Reza Eslan did a kid's book about Palestine, right?
Israel and Palestine.
Yep. So, okay, just some basic background. Give the people the basics of how this started.
Yeah. So I have 6 kids. That's a lot of kids. It's okay to gasp. It's a blended family. So it's like Brady Bunch, right? I got 2 black biological kids and 4 white stepkids. And having that conversation around race, culture, color, and racism with my kids felt so important. And look, I didn't grow up with a dad. My wonderful white mom tried the best she could, but we didn't really have these conversations growing up, except amongst each other as siblings. So I wanted my kids to have something better. So like any good dad, I made a book for my kids. It was only supposed to be 1 copy. We'll start that conversation on racism and basically make it okay for them to always come to me with questions, their experiences at school, the soccer field, you name it. And
question for you real quick.
Yeah.
Because I know you've told this story 50 million times. So my goal is always to try and ask a question that hasn't been asked.
Divert me. Love it.
Did you doubt that you should write this book at any point?
No.
Because, I feel like some parents be like, I don't know if I want my kids to know about racism yet and blah, blah,
No, I actually quite the opposite. Growing up with a really traumatic childhood, I realized not having the conversations too early was a bigger risk than having them too late or the other way around. I wanted to start those conversations as early as possible with my kids so that they could ask me questions and not experience things alone. So I wrote the book in a week. I designed it in a week. I handed a copy to my kids and they saw what I didn't see is they were like, Dad, this is so cool. This is 2 10-year-olds, by the way. They were like, you can make a kid's book about anything. And I was like, huh. Yeah. I was like, well, what would you do a book about? And my son Al was like, I do a kid's book about ice cream. And I was like, oh yeah, okay.
Yes. I would buy that.
But my son Jay was like, I do a kid's book about divorce. And I was like, oh. And all of a sudden, all these sort of neurons started firing for me because of what I realized was by me actually taking the brave step to put this book in front of my kids wasn't just going to spark a conversation about racism. It was actually going to spark all these other conversations and all these other vulnerable moments. And I was like, man. And so I was running another company at the time. I did no business starting a publishing company. I'd never written a book other than my little book that I'd made for my kids.
Right.
But I was like, man, I really think there's something here, and I don't think anybody is either brave or stupid enough to do this. And so I remember one afternoon, I sat down and I was like, okay, I'm not going to start a publisher, but if I did, what topics would I do? A kid's book about what? And I was like, oh, well, we got to talk about sex. We got to talk about love. We got to talk about depression. We got to talk about anxiety. We got to talk about bullying. We got to talk about death. We got to talk about cancer. And I went and I like literally took me 10 minutes to rattle off 100 ideas. And I had to stop. And I was like, whoa,
Shucks,
I
I
could
can
keep
do this.
going. Like, this is too easy. And I was
Yeah.
like, nobody's going to do this, because you sort of need this strange Voltron of maladies and superpowers to be able to do it. Me, I have 6 kids, so I spend more time being a dad than anything else. I'm an entrepreneur by trade, so I start companies and businesses and products. And I genuinely think there is no too early with any conversation, almost with any kid, on the most difficult, challenging, tough, sticky, worst topics. And so I was like, man, I just got to do this in some way to see if it'll work, but also to go, these are the kind of books that I wish I had when I was a kid.
There you go. Yeah.
And these are the kind of books that this next generation really deserves. If they're going to build that world that we all think we deserve, I'm tired of convincing adults, because it's too hard, and most of them don't change their minds.
Facts.
But kids can grow up with these ideas. And what is a generation of kids who grow up with these ideas around understanding systemic racism at 6 years old, understanding, dynamics of power, understanding democracy? Like, what kind of generation grows up, and what kind of world do they build? What kind of societies, what kind of communities do they build? And so I took the leap in 2019 and launched with 12 books. And it's been a wild ride ever since.
Are there any titles that like surprised you that you hadn't even considered, and it was like, oh, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, we I had a long list of titles, and I was like, we got to do these. And every once in a while, somebody would come to me with a suggestion. I thought, that's interesting. So one of them was nervous system regulation. How do we regulate our bodies? And especially for kids, it's really difficult. I thought, great book, bad sales. It's just a terrible title of kids' book about nerve. Just too long. And it's been one of our best books, because
I was going to say,
are like,
I bought it. I bought that book for me.
There you go. See, that's and so we, for me, it's about finding the voice and the topic and trying to align those things, and not putting huge pressure on what I think will do well and won't do well. We ended up doing a book with Jessica Biel on periods, and I thought, yeah, we should probably do sort of sexual health, sort of body stuff. Periods, yeah, sure. And going through the process of making the book, I just thought, man, I'm actually the demographic for this book, because I grew up as that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid who didn't know anything about periods, even though I had 2 sisters and a mom. And it took me till college to first sort of start to get my understanding. And even then, now I'm a dad of kids who have periods, and it's like, there's stigma, there's all this stuff surrounded around it. And so I had all this stuff that I was actually needing to unpack with this book, that I thought, this is the book that I needed when I was 7 years old to start with, to destigmatize this thing that half of the population experiences.
So you talked about in the process of writing the book. So can you share with folks what that process is?
Yeah, it's wild, it's crazy, and it is not like anything in the publishing world. We have made 200 books with this process, and it is both foolproof and chaotic and crazy. The closest proxies are improv jazz and improv comedy meets group therapy. We write all of our books through a 1-day workshop process. We bring in an author for 3 to 5 hours, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. We spend the whole first half on personal story, telling our life stories through the lens of the topic, whatever that topic might be. Maybe we know a lot about the topic, maybe we don't, but we try and put all of those vulnerable gems. Like, so me, I would talk about not growing up with a dad, and neglect from my mom, and abuse from my brother, and trying to wrestle with chronic depression at, age 14. I would actually walk through those things as vulnerably as I can through the lens of the topic. And then by the time I've gone and our creative director's gone and our editor's gone, now it's the author's turn. And we've sort of set a stage to go, hey, you're going to be vulnerable too. You're going to spill all your guts too, right? And there's a bit of a social pressure there, but there's also trust to go, we've already gone there. You're safe to go there too. Once we do that, then there's a healthy conversation of going, what must go in this book? What must go in this book about addiction? What must go in this book about joy? What must go in this book about coping skills? All books that we've done. And then whole second half, we write the book together. And it sounds like it shouldn't work. We've got about 2 hours left at that moment, but we work together and we trust each other, and the creativity's bubbling because you just spilled your life story. So you're sort of unblocked and totally free to do that. And we do a litmus test at the end. We have the author read the book, and it's a litmus test on two fronts. One, does this read, right? Are we listening to it, and does it sound like a children's book? And then we ask ourselves the second question is, could this have made a massive impact on me when I was 6, 7, 8 years old?
Right.
Could this have changed the trajectory of my life? Was this a conversation that I didn't get that I desperately needed? And if we can say yes to those both those questions, we know we're on to something. So that's the first draft manuscript. We spend a handful of weeks editing, a handful of weeks designing. Every time I try and explain this to somebody who's published a book before, they go, well, but what about? And I go, no, that all happens in the workshop. They go, yeah, but what about what do I do before the workshop? You don't do anything before the workshop. It happens in the workshop. And the sort of the crux of it is it's about choosing the right voice for the topic. They need to be unassailable. They need to be unimpeachable. They need to be, through their life lived experience, through their identity, through their education, through their expertise, they need to be able to deliver on that topic. And I'm not saying we're batting 1,000, but we've done pretty well about choosing authors.
As I'm listening to you, I'm just like, which one is my book? You know what's funny is that right now it's like there's all these like big, like the titles are about things that range, right, in terms of their expansiveness and then their simplicity, because something that's like Side Effects of Israel and Palestine has a very expansive conversation that has to happen that I feel like is different than I said Side Effects because that's the name of my that's my podcast. A kid's book about. But then there's also like a kid's book about divorce, which is, I feel like, less political, right? And it's more experiential. And then I find that there's at this point things that I would never have applied to kids need to know about this to understand the world better, but it's something that I wouldn't think need to be earnestly discussed, but like the concept of just like truth, like honesty, like we're in such a land of lies that I genuinely am like, I was taught about that in school. Like I was taught that it mattered to be like honest and tell the truth, and I don't know if kids are taught that anymore. I don't know that society even says that anymore. Like I genuinely was always castigated for even a fib. I don't know if you grew up in this type of house. I couldn't call people liars. For some reason, I don't know about did y'all have that? Maybe it was a West Indian thing.
No, but it's funny. I will tell my kids, I go, it's a strong word. I go, they lied, but does that make them a liar? I go, it's just think about it. Right.
Like if I said I hated something, it would be like, well, do you really hate it? Or do you just not like it? Because hate is a strong word. Yeah. And sometimes I'd be like, yeah, no, I hate cauliflower. Like, quit putting that in front of me. I don't just dislike it. I despise it. Yeah. Part of my wanting to learn vocabulary was just so that I could have more ways to explain. Like, no, really, I mean this. Yeah. So where do you feel like this book series exists in our current climate in terms of necessity, in terms of how it can be used as tools?
I think you hit it on the nose. It's about truth telling. It's about not trying to save the conversation for later, or I'll tell you when you grow up, or you wouldn't understand. It's about actually being candid with kids, respecting their intelligence, respecting their curiosity, and respecting their experiences, right? And so each of the books is trying to not finish a conversation. So our Israel Palestine book isn't finishing the conversation, isn't saying everything that there is to say about it, because that would be impossible. It's starting the conversation. It's creating the context for that conversation to go on and on and on. And it's really about opening a door on both sides for the kid who's being introduced sometimes to a new thing, or sometimes to a thing that they're already aware of, but want the sort of concrete words, but also for the grown-up who's likely there reading with them, parent, auntie, uncle, teacher, you name it, who needs that fear taken down a notch to just have the conversation, right? Because we walk in with all these sorts of fears. Oh, I'm going to ruin my kid's life. Oh, they're not ready yet. Oh, they need to be a teenager. Oh, if I tell them about this, what if they do drugs because I tell them about drugs, right? So it's like all these weird, complicated feelings then gets us to sort of bottle up and go, oh, I don't want to have this conversation. And so it loosens that fear and allows parents to go, oh, my kid's actually okay. Oh, my kid has questions. Oh, I have thoughts and ideas that I can share. And now that conversation, instead of happening once, is an ongoing one that actually can happen across weeks and years and grow and grow and grow. So where does it fit in the climate today? I think our kids desperately need signposts and sort of flags in the ground, because we do live in a world where so many of the people in power have basically said up is down, left is right. What you saw with your own eyes wasn't real, and that's not what happened. In fact, it was the opposite of that. And why don't you agree with me? And also, I will threaten you if you don't agree with me. It's a very tenuous and scary time to live. And so just to have that validation to go, yeah, the thing that I saw felt like this and is this, and actually have someone giving you those words back, giving you the comfort and the confidence, both as a grown-up and as a kid, to know something's real and tangible and true.
I feel like there's probably some people who are like, well, we didn't need this, but these kids need this. I feel like I would have really appreciated as a kid, like these, like even if they were just all at the library and I could just pick one by one, like we talking about this week, but I feel like parents too, there's so much that my mom just was not equipped to address because of her upbringing, because of her ignorance about a topic, etc. And so there's a lot. I think what you've done here too is not just equip the kids, but like you really have equipped parents in a way where there is a concerted effort to handicap them. Like on a daily basis, I just see such an effort to say like, oh, it's about parents' rights, but it's really not. It's about like keeping parents stupid and their kids stupider.
Yeah.
How do you talk to your kids about the current climate?
It's pretty candid. I like to listen a lot more than I try and talk with my kids, and that might sound counterintuitive. But if I create enough space for my kids to feel comfortable to bring me stuff, then I try and listen and ask questions. Because sometimes it's not about reframing their ideas or teaching them some new thing. It's about actually letting them fully share their experience in a way that they won't be judged, or in a way that they won't be sort of given a lecture over, right? And then what typically happens is I'll offer back some of my experiences. Oh, here's what it was like when I was a kid, or here's what it's like for me today. And then maybe a little nugget of truth inside there. But kids are so used to getting talked down to, so used to getting lectured. And so I find, my kids know they can kind of bring me anything. And so, we're having conversations about everything, trans rights, Elon Musk, democracy. My kids were dialed in and tuned into the election in a way that I just never could have imagined at their age. Like my 6-year-old can articulate thoughts and feelings about our president. You know what I mean? Like that's that.
My friend was just telling me that the other day, that her son was like, I don't like President Trump. I was like, in 6th grade, I know that when I was 6, no one in my class knew who the president was. Like, I know that.
Yeah. No, look, it was a different time in some ways, but as much as we've I don't know, talk down to our kids about their sort of chronic onlineness and how much they spend on their devices and screen time and anxiety and blah, 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 which a lot of that I actually think is true. It has opened our kids to a world of information and understanding and the ability to dig deeper and to go find answers to things and experiences that aren't their own. I actually think it's really incredible. And I think, I look at Gen Z and I look at Gen Alpha, and with all of their foibles around a bunch of different stuff that maybe we as millennials had growing up or whatever, or the Generation X or the boomers, I think they are more driven towards activism. I think they are more driven towards inclusion and belonging.
Yeah.
I think they are more welcoming and accepting. And I also think they don't put up with anything. Like they're not just trying to take the pat answers or this is the way that it's always been done as a given. Of course, that's not all of those generations, but I see that very strongly in my own kids.
How did your style of parenting form?
I didn't grow up with a dad. He left when I was about 4. I would later reconcile with him, and he said that, when I was born, I was the youngest of 4 kids, that it was like a truck full of heroin had backed up in the neighborhood. That's how readily available drugs were. And so he and my mom were both addicts. My mom decided to get clean, moves across town, says, "Dad, you can come when you get clean." He never gets clean, or at least by the time he does, I don't see him.
This is in Oregon?
This is in Oregon.
Damn, they was putting heroin on the streets in Oregon?
Putting heroin on the streets in Oregon. And so I grew up without a dad. Mom worked nights as a nurse, doing the best she could to put food on the table, but wasn't.
Shout out to the nurses. My mother is a nurse.
But she wasn't always there for me emotionally, and so I struggled a lot as a kid. I struggled to read. I wasn't proficiently reading until about 7th or 8th grade. I always got bad grades, even though I was a really smart kid. I was the kid with all the potential in the classroom, but never really doing well. I would later find out that I was dealing with really sort of chronic depression. And I remember like wanting somebody to just shoot straight with me, to just like to see that I wasn't growing up with a dad, and I was, going home after school by myself, and that like I just wanted somebody to notice all those things, and if they did, they never said anything. So by the time I became a grown-up, I was like, okay, childhood actually isn't easy for every child. In fact, it might not be easy for any child. And so this like, oh, let kids be kids, oh, protect their innocence, I'll let them have fun and grow up, I think minimizes the real experiences that kids have around racism, around discrimination, around misogyny, around bullying, around abuse, whether that's domestic violence in the home, sexual abuse, you name it. And so I thought, I'm actually going to try and have every conversation too early. I'm going to be sort of uncomfortably honest with my kids, especially when they ask me about something. I'm going to be very direct with them early on, so they know I'm never going to shoot back one of their questions and give them a pat answer, or not acknowledge them or save it for later. I'm always actually going to engage directly. And I'm always going to try and foster room for a conversation, so they never have to be alone with these thoughts and feelings, which is actually the harder part, right? And I
think I'm in therapy right now.
And that's a part of our books, is like that's they're therapeutic in that way. They actually speak to our 7-year-old self. And I remember, with one of my youngest, when they were, oh gosh, maybe 5, maybe 6. Where do babies come from, Dad? Oh, I would love to explain that to you. I get out a pad of paper, and I'm drawing biology. I'm explaining. Here's what happens: seed, egg, blah blah blah. I go, does this make sense? Oh yeah, but what's that thing right there? Oh yeah, let me draw it a little more clearly. And this is in the parking lot, feels like a Safeway, right? And they were okay. I was okay. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I remember when my wife and I got married, I told her that story, and she's like, "You did what?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, we had the conversation." I go, "We can have it again." Is one of our other kids, and she was like, "Whoa," but like, and all of a sudden it was like she didn't even know what she was afraid of. It was just like, but what could happen, right? where we were driving. My son, he's like 7 at the time. We passed by a strip club. He's like, "What's a gentleman's club?" Because he saw it's like gentlemen, something something. And I was like, "Oh, you want to know what that is?" And we're on the way to school. All of our kids are in the car, right? And I was like, "Oh, well," and it led to this amazing conversation about our bodies, about intimacy, about relationships, about um I, all of these things. And my wife was like, "I cannot believe you did that." Not in a sort of castigating way, but in a
No.
way where we're sort of like, I didn't expect that actually to be one a thing and okay, but also to go as positive, like that our kids engage with it in a meaningful way.
Kids are not having conversations about things from the same place that adults are.
Yeah.
Like they are having genuine, curious
Yeah.
conversations that don't carry judgment in the same way.
They don't have all the baggage.
They don't have the baggage. So it's a different conversation to, like, what's a gentleman's club? Well, can I just hear even an excerpt of how that answer was?
Yeah, well, I was like, well, typically, women stand on a stage with a pole, and then I go and they undress their clothes to show their bodies to typically men who are there to pay them money to watch them undress. And of course, their question was like, why would anybody do that? And I go, well, for the women, I go, it's typically a job. I go, they get paid money to do this, both getting paid as a salary or, hourly, and also from the tips, right? And I go, men bring cash and they will set it on there, and they like the enjoyment of watching these women do this. And of course, my kids go, but why would they enjoy that? So we're getting further, and I go because it's interesting to them and attractive to them to see their bodies, right? Why is that? So we're getting into like, okay, why is it? Why are people attracted to it? In some ways, the conversation actually got more innocent the further we went in, right? Because kids want to unpack that stuff. Now, there's all sorts of bad ways to probably have a conversation, but the easiest way and the best way is just to be honest about the actual mechanics of the thing. And
You
then
know
you
what? That's
go,
the thing right there. It's the mechanics. Like the way you just explained it is like, yeah, that is what it is. like I did not need to add in like, and these men are usually having terrible, marriages, and they're drunks and they're hard in their pants. Like that's not necessary.
yeah,
That's not necessary. But I
yeah.
cut you off. Continue. I'm
No,
so
I mean,
fascinated.
I think, well, look, I get to travel around now to go talk with elementary schools. It's my favorite thing that I do as a part of my job, even though I don't get paid for it. And I'll meet with 500 K through 5, and I'll do much of what I'm doing here. I'll tell my story. I'll talk about my book. I'll read my book. I'll talk about these big ideas, why we made these books for kids. And of course, a couple kids will raise their hand and go, "Oh, I have your book, or I have this book, or this is my favorite book." But I always end in the same way. I say, if you could write a kid's book about anything, this is elementary school students, by the way. If you could write a kid's book about anything, what would you write about? And kids, you think it'd all be Minecraft, candy, and video games, and I like ponies or I like skateboarding. No, kids will come with the heaviest,
Right.
most consequential topics. I've had, kids pitch me, you should do a kid's book about toxic relationships. I would do a kid's book about abuse. I would do a kid's book about nuclear warfare. I would do a kid's book about having an incarcerated parent. And often what's happening when kids are saying these topics is they're speaking towards a personal experience, or at least a personal interest of their own, right? And kids will grab me afterwards and go, I didn't get a chance to tell you my idea. I really think you should do a book on this. And then of course they've got me there, and they'll go, and here's why. And they'll share an experience that they had. Often that was around somebody being racist towards them, somebody bullying them, somebody, a parent. One kid grabbed me afterwards, a third grader, and said, my dad used to abuse me and now he's in jail and my mom and I are safe now. And she was telling me this, not so that she would have a book for herself. She's saying some other kid needs this book. Do you know what I'm saying? She's offering up her life experiences, going, here's why you should go do some work somewhere else for some other kid. And in that way, like a whole bunch of things are happening as I watch kids feel empowered. I watch kids feel validated for their own experiences, right?
Yeah.
I watch kids not feel so alone, right? in there, and you've got kids saying some of the most vulnerable stuff in front of the whole student body,
Mhm.
because in some sense, all I've done is shown up and said, "It's okay.
Yeah.
I've modeled how you can do this, which is I'm going to share my story very vulnerably. Y'all can do that back to me, and it's going to be okay, and everybody's going to be awesome." And I'll watch teachers sort of on the sidelines, not gasp quite, but sort of their jaws on the floor, going, "What happened to our kids? Like our
Right.
kids they're showing up in a totally different way."
That last line, they're showing up in a totally different way, is what I think is so important in the reality that kids become adults. And
Yeah.
we need adults to show up in a different way, if this world is going to save itself. And that starts with how they get to be seen as kids. And one of the things that really scares me, particularly in the United States, is just the effort that is made to create adults that don't know how to show up for themselves,
Yeah.
that don't know how to understand, like they don't know how to understand themselves, because they're not even there's no curiosity fostered to understand themselves, let alone other people, right? To
Yeah.
understand this planet and how we all. So what I really love about the series is that it fosters from an early age this concept that the world is yours. Like all of these experiences, topics, etc., are available for you to understand, whether they happen to you or
Mm.
whether they impact you. But they are, when I say the world is yours, that's also like a part of your responsibility to protect. And I think that kids see that as like something exciting, versus
Mm.
whereas adults see that as obligation.
Yeah.
Like with the masks, I just remember people being like, the kids don't want to wear the mask. Kids don't give a goddamn. They like, is Spider-Man on the mask?
Yeah.
If Spider-Man's on the mask, I'm wearing the mask, But adults are like, no, if I'm wearing a mask, you're expecting me to be obligated for this other human being. And it's like, why is that a problem for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have some questions from the people. Shamika says, Mr. Memory, is your work at the local library, and is there a kid's book about puberty?
Yes and yes. We've sold over 1 million books, I think, across 5 to 6 years, and we have great relationships with libraries, with schools, school districts, of course, indie bookstores and big box bookstores. So you can kind of find the books anywhere. And a kid's book about puberty is definitely in there.
There you go. Paloma says, Mr. Memory, do you seek collaboration with professionals or people representing communities that you're discussing?
I love this. I love it. This is like a trap question that I know is actually well intentioned. It is always about representing those identities from members of those communities who represent those identities. I've had books pitched to me by folks who work with folks, who help certain folks. You can imagine this is like whether that's folks who are deaf or blind, whether that's folks who are houseless, and they go, "Oh, I'm an expert at this.
You're not
I've done
houseless,
work
though.
in the nonprofit world. Oh, I should write this book." And I go, but is this a part of your own experience?
Yeah.
It's a part of your identity. Is this a part of, so we always say no on that front and opt for somebody who is, who lives inside that identity. There's a couple rare exceptions. And those are our historical books. A kid's book about Israel and Palestine is a history. It's a history book. So we found a historian. A kid's book about the Tulsa Race Massacre is a history book. We found a historian, right? And then it's about trying to find the right historian that we think is going to reflect the story in a way that's going to be meaningful for kids and a conversation starter.
There you go, guys. You was ready for that one. It's like, I've answered this question several times. Next question. Miss Seals and Mr. Memory, I was a kid told by adults to not worry about adult things, which was devaluing as a kid who had questions. These books help both adults and kids. Thank you. So that was more of a comment than a question. I was one of those kids too, though, like by certain adults. My mom didn't do that. My mom wouldn't say, like, I remember, like, I've seen way too many movies that I shouldn't have seen because my mom was just like, we're going to the movies.
Yeah, you go see it sometime.
Like, I remember when I went to, we went to see Pulp Fiction, and the person at the door was like, are you sure? And my mom was like, just give me the ticket.
Wait, here's what I love, and I've seen this happen over and over again, is it often takes one or two safe grown-ups who are in close proximity to us to determine who we are able to become when we are grown-ups. Okay. So
Say that one more time. Say that one more time. Say one more time.
It takes one or two safe grown-ups to determine who we can become when we're grown-ups. Okay. So your mom's lack of fear around bringing you to that movie, around having certain conversations with you, not batting back those adult things. She go, I'm going to pull you right in. To me, I go, that's who you are today. Actually, she set the ceiling much higher to go, oh yeah, go run, Amanda, go. And for me, huge credit to my mom. No conversation was off limits. Just genuinely, no conversation was off limits with my mom. That doesn't mean we always had them, but it wasn't off limits. She never said, oh, don't worry about that. You're not old enough for that. And that, I think, raised that bar. And so the reason why we have a lot of grown-ups who go, oh, you can't do that, is because that's what their parents did with them.
Well, we love what you are doing with these books and giving parents the opportunity to do exactly what you just said, because I really feel like also if you're in a single parent home, these books can help fill a gap that another person physically being there would possibly be filling. I know, like in my single parent home, I feel like these books would have been really helpful, because if my father had been there, it would have been even less conversation. So I just remember my dad trying to talk to me about sex, and we were snowed in like, he had decided we were going to go skiing. I don't like skiing, but okay, we're going skiing. And we were snowed in, and there was a giant glass of orange juice. He was always giving me like more portions than I needed. And there was a giant glass of orange juice, and he was like, so let's talk about the birds and the bees. And I was like, I don't want to talk about this at all. And he was like, well, you can either drink that whole glass of orange juice or talk about this. Y'all, when I tell you, I was like, glug, 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 glug. Ta-da!
How old were you then?
I was 12. Like, I had already seen a porno.
Yeah. 12 it's just too late. It's too late. It's like, kids know.
I already know, and I already don't like you, and this is already too much.
And the fact that he was like birds and the bee, it's just like, why do we use this language?
Why was a doctor.
Adults? Yeah, it's like, what's the malady?
No, 12 was too late. I saw a porno at 8.
Yeah,
I don't even know if my mom knows
that's
that.
Why, like, starting with conversations seems insane at 5, 6, and 7. The problem is, if you don't start them then, they have already been had somewhere else. Your kid's 3rd grade best friend has had that conversation with that, like, somewhere else where this happened, and now kids got the internet. It's like, then why not? What's the risk in actually having it in that safe environment with you, where your kids can ask you whatever questions you want, because you're the safe grown-up, right? But the moment you go, oh no, it's too early, kids will just find that answer somewhere else.
Facts on facts on facts. Do you have any releases coming out soon that you've already publicized?
Oh gosh, that you can speak on? My mind is mostly in the books that we're working on now.
Do you talk about those before they come out?
Not usually. So Penguin Random House and DK bought the publishing business last summer. So now I run a kids book about imprint underneath the big PRH umbrella, which has been awesome and wonderful. And they're really letting me sort of cook on just the book projects that I think are really worthwhile. And so as a part of that, we're bringing in the full backlist of 200 titles, which you can see.
Dang, crates.
I had to like make a special sell all 200 titles into the front list, and so those are being published in batches of 25 until we're done, basically every month of the first 6 months of this year. So all of those are coming out, so they're all getting sort of reissued by DK, and sort of a new fun format with all the nerdy book stuff that I love, just the colored end sheets and stuff like that. But I know we have a book about self-love by Brandon Farbstein, a really incredible book. We've got a book on chronic illness that's coming out. It's a really lovely book by Gigi Robinson, and a number of others. I mean, They're on the Kids Co website. They're on the PRH website. They're on the DK website, of course, on Amazon and everywhere else. So shop where you shop. People buy books where they buy books. And if you've thought of the topic, we've probably already done it. And if we haven't already done it, then maybe reach out. Maybe you can do that topic.
There you go. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for your service, because this really is a service. And yeah, you have an email coming from me shortly, by the way.
All right.
Finally.
All right. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right.
Y'all. We back. We back. What do y'all think my book would be? What would my book be? A kid's book about what? Part of me want to do an adult book. An adult book about kids. Like, I mean, that's what I want to do. An adult book about your inner child. An adult book about, well, I mean, that's not the thing though. The thing is a kid's book. Like, all right. A kid's book about, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing a kid's book about autism, but a kid's book about speaking up. A kid's book about speaking up. A kid's book about being yourself. A kid's book about being yourself. That, because Jelani was saying that's like that they choose who does the books based on have they lived it. And what I tell you, I done lived the good, the bad, and the ugly about being myself. I tell you that. The thing about being yourself is that it is a constant effort and journey and joy. So showing up authentically, being yourself, is I always say it's hard to stick to your guns when it feels like everyone else's is pointed at you. So like when people will ask me, like, what's your advice on getting into the entertainment business? I never tell them like, oh, go take a class. I never tell them like, get an agent. I tell them my advice on getting into the entertainment business is make sure you're surrounded by people that know you as well as you know you, that believe in you as well as you believe in you, because there's going to be times in this process where doubt and confusion and, things bigger than you might make you question who you really are. And you're going to need those mirrors to see that reflection and be reminded. Like, I feel like I always had that. Sometimes even by like the worst people. I've dated some terrible niggas, but they knew who I was. That's part of why they were so terrible to me. But they knew who I was. And so there were times when I would be kind of floundering about or doubtful about just myself in the space. And they would be able to be like, no. I always tell y'all, Boldy James is terrible. But I tell you what, he gave me a line that I still live in to this day. Remember, you the plug. Always remember that you the plug. And I'm like, dang, you right. I am the plug. He would always say that. Like these managers, these agents, these producers, like they need artists and people like you in order to do what they do. So you are the plug. The comedy is that it is drug reference. And if you know his work, you're like, that makes sense. All right. So y'all have, okay, critical thinking as one. That's a good one. Kids book about critical thinking. Ooh. I wonder if they already have that one. Let's see. Is there a kid's book about critical thinking? A kid's book about critical thinking. Yes, there is. Good. No, there isn't. It says kids book. No, I didn't say kids book. I said a kid's book about critical thinking. Nope. There is no a kid's book about critical thinking. There's no kid's book about critical thinking. That sounds like a good one. A kid's book about critical thinking, a kid's book about being yourself, a kid's book about authenticity, a kid's book about changing the system. I think a kid's book about authenticity sounds real I don't know if that would sell because remember, it's a business, but a kid's book about critical thinking, let me write these down. A kid's book about critical thinking, a kid's book about authenticity. Y'all, I was supposed to go somewhere today and the plans changed. And when I tell you, I'm so relieved. Okay. Hold on one second. So what did we say? We said a kid's book about authenticity, critical thinking, being yourself. I think those are my favorites. Being an empath. Ooh. Ooh. They have one about empathy that I do know. Man, Denisha said a book about standing on business, spelled BITNESS. A kid's book about standing on business is definitely. I enjoyed laughing and learning with you. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And tell your friends. Also, listen to the podcast. It's available everywhere pods are casted. Listen ad-free by subscribing to Patreon Amanda Seals. Come on and join the Seals Squad. Views from Amandaland. Live 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Wednesday, with content on Thursday and Friday at YouTube Amanda Seals TV. Smart, funny, and